Hi everyone, I'm Lizette with A Ferraris Law, and with me is Christine, our lead attorney, to answer some questions about forced arbitration and your consumer rights. Christine, welcome.
Thank you, Lizette. As usual, thank you.
Okay, so our first question is what exactly is forced arbitration and why um, should consumers be concerned about it?
Well, forced arbitration is when you don't have a choice because it's forced, right? We find them, and I think that consumers may have seen them. Sometimes we overlook them, but most of the time they're buried in behind the last page of a document or in a booklet, like maybe with you have your booklet for opening up your bank account, the terms and conditions of, opening that account. And if something the bank does wrong, it will say in there that your only option, you can't sue us or pursue anything. You have to go to forced arbitration. And which means that you have to go to a forum that may be not receptive to kind of consumer types of claims. A lot of consumer advocates have concerns about forced arbitration because it's not a public forum. The rules of procedure and evidence that are required in courts aren't necessarily available. Always they have particular rules that sometimes favor businesses and corporations, and it's not always a forum that is friendly to consumers because the businesses are supportive of these organizations. Let's just say that much. And sometimes there is, I guess the best way to put it is that they kind of collaborate and work together in ways to make it easier for businesses to not have to pay consumers for any kind of harm that was done. And I might be kind of over generalizing in a way, but there was a recent lawsuit filed against the American Arbitration Association, which not only is it a forced arbitration, but this arbitration provision that's often in contracts, in an auto contracts, where you're purchasing an automobile, will have like that you must go to the American Arbitration Association to be able to dispute anything that we did wrong or any type of potential claim that you have, which limits your options in terms of holding them responsible for if they cheated you. And this particular forum is more friendly towards businesses, and they often don't have arbitrators that are judges. They're usually attorneys that have worked for insurance companies and auto uh, companies and on defense side of things, which gives them a great perspective in how the other side works. But sometimes they're more favorable. And by and large, at least this recent lawsuit that was filed here in Arizona, um, there's been some data collected where it shows that there's been a huge disparagement in terms of how consumer cases have been treated, and that by and large, the corporations are winning. And if the consumers do actually win in arbitration, the amount that they win is very small, probably compared to the damages they actually had. So the awards just aren't what you would see in a court case where a jury, members of our peers, ideally make decisions about the facts. Instead, it's just one person who may or may not, but by and large, some of the data is showing may have a bias towards getting repeat business from that uh, business that is using them as arbitrator. And often in the American Arbitration Association, you don't have a choice of an arbitrator. You have to take what they give you. So it is what it is, right?
Oh my goodness. Okay, now I understand. So another question is how do class action protect consumers? How are they affected by arbitration clauses?
How you know what, I think I need to turn up my volume because I don't think I quite heard you. Can you repeat
Oh
that?
no.
That's all right.
Yes.
Well, that's on my end, but go ahead. I heard you say something about class actions
Yeah.
and forced arbitration and how they so let me just answer it because I think I did understand what you said. With what I under what I think I heard is that class actions and a lot of times in these arbitration clauses, or maybe there's a separate clause, it prevents people from actually pursuing class actions, and that the only option would be to file for arbitration, so that when the consumer has a smaller claim, which often is the case in class actions, at least on the consumer side, when there's mass tort types of issues where somebody has had suffered, or a lot of people have suffered a huge personal injury or loss of income and that kind of a thing, there are larger damages. But in the consumer claims, when a bank or insurance company potentially may be cheating and harming consumers economically, sometimes those amounts can be just like $100, $200, $300. It's not a small amount, but it's roughly too small to pursue a standalone case, unless you want to go to small claims. And people are entitled to do that. And usually small claims is the out. If in Arizona, that's $3,500 in damages. So you can often avoid arbitration by going to small claims. That is available. But if you have claims that maybe are 4,000 or 5,000, or really don't want to go to small claims because maybe it's only $10. Um, and there are attorneys that focus on, when, they're overcharging of fees by banks or some other deceptive or unfair conduct. Class actions are a way for a large group of people to get some kind of justice, but those types of actions are excluded by businesses sometimes because they don't want to have consumers get together and sue them, because it can be potentially harmful, I guess, to them, and if they're held accountable for cheating a lot of people all at once. And so they're going to force people to go to arbitration, which again is not a public forum, so people don't really know about that they somehow been cheated. Another area of this is like defects, auto defects, when either the dealer that's selling the vehicle or the manufacturer hasn't been disclosing, even though they're aware of it. They've maybe reported it to a federal authority, but then they're not giving proper and timely notice to the consumer. So these types of cases, because if there is a contract provision that prevents a class action from happening, then they don't really have a recourse, because unless they pursue it individually, and that can be really costly.
Yeah, I can just imagine. So, another question I have is, are there any industries or contracts where forced arbitration is especially common?
Well, I mentioned the auto industry,
Yeah.
and I'm talking about the retail and the financing. I see arbitration provisions more often than not. Banks, when you sign up for your account. The one thing I should mention, though, is that you should look at these contracts and then maybe cross it out and say, hey, I'm not agreeing to this as part of my contract because I want to have options, as I'm entitled to, if you don't do something that you should that you're obligated to do. And so I remind people, like, next time you go buy a car and you see that, and some of the industries will have an opt out. I've noticed this on cell phone contracts where they do have an arbitration provision. If you respond within a month and say, I'm opting out of this arbitration, I don't want to be subject to this, then it's allowing you to do that, but that means you have to take action to do that. So, the smaller types of purchases often have them in there where there's a bigger company involved. And like I said, the auto industry and insurance industry too. I know that if you have a dispute with your insurance company about how they've processed or not processed your claim, they'll mandate that you go to an arbitration first. And so, And so getting advice about, how to, if it's enforceable or not, because sometimes people don't see the arbitration clause, and sometimes, there's forged signatures under that arbitration agreement or that particular page. You may not even seen the page. You may be or electronically signing, your finance documents for the auto, and didn't even see that page, or because, it just says sign here, sign here, sign here.
Yeah, I think that's really a thing because um, no one really always reads everything of the
No.
contract, especially the fine print.
Right.
So,
And it is, not only is it fine, I mean, it's fine print, and it really should be print that we can really see because it's kind of important. But you're exactly right.
exactly. So, what should consumers do if they think they've been forced into arbitration or feel like their rights are being ignored?
Well, I think obviously speaking to somebody, about that, sometimes arbitration, it can work. I don't want to completely say that it's not, because I do know lawyers that do arbitrate, but, getting someone who works with arbitration in that particular area and finding out, the lawyers that are familiar with the process and are, having success with that process I think is helpful. And just making sure you pay attention when you're signing things. And if you don't want to agree to the arbitration, even though it's all printed nice and neat, try crossing it out and saying you don't agree to buy this car, you're not agreeing to buy this cell phone, making sure you understand that, you're going to be bound by, and sometimes it just seems like it's just a cell phone, right? But some of these cell phones are like, 1,000, 1,500, they're very expensive. So opting out of that, if there is that option, I'm highly suggesting that, folks do that. And I should mention too, speaking to your congressperson about arbitration and the unfairness, it's in a lot of employment agreements too. Now, employers are making it because they don't want, you know, um, any type of complaint going to court. So in Congress, there has been legislation that's been initiated to because arbitration between businesses who have negotiated that, and that's how arbitration started. But between a bigger business and a smaller consumer, it's inherently unfair. So there's been legislation that's been, let's say, percolating at the federal level to get an act passed where prohibiting forced arbitration in consumer contracts. So speaking to your local representative about this, if that's something, because a lot of more people are getting affected and they're becoming more aware of the forced arbitration issues. And so becoming more knowledgeable that way. There's plenty of information on the internet, and there's been plenty of advocates who have been trying to fight on behalf of consumers to make it more fair.
Yeah, I think also like we mentioned previously, just reading the fine print, and I have a suggestion. I would also maybe research the company. I think that's what we find with some of our cases. Before you purchase a car or something from somebody,
Yeah,
research the
yeah, yeah.
company
Looking,
where
yeah,
they, where
yeah.
you
How they've
buy
resolved problems, right?
from.
Um, I, that goes without saying for anything, right? Whether it be
Yeah,
forced arbitration clause, how they honor their warranties, researching companies to the extent of how they deal with problems is always, and asking them, right? And if I have a problem with this car, are you going to honor the warranty? Because you told me you did, but I'm not seeing that language in this agreement, like exactly what you said. So holding them accountable, like as part of that purchase transaction, in terms of what's in there, and then asking about that. What does the arbitration clause mean, like, to them, and seeing and making sure that it's clear that you understand that. And if they misrepresent what that arbitration clause means, that you may have an argument to say that you didn't really agree to it. And sometimes there are arguments about that where someone didn't really receive it because their initials were, forged, or maybe they didn't understand it because when they asked about it, it wasn't explained to them as to what it really means in terms
Yeah.
of giving up their rights. I mean, it might say that in the provision itself, but they may not completely understand what that means. So maybe before you go into that purchase, really understand exactly what you're giving up.
Yeah, that is true. So, thank you so much, Christine, for your time and for explaining this for us all. So, guys, if you have more questions or you think your rights as a consumer have been violated, contact us at A Ferraris Law. We're here to help. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
Lizette.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yay!